The vast emptiness of space surrounded the interstellar vessel, celestial wanderer, as it glided through the Andromeda Milky Way corridor. Captain Viextala sat in her command chair, her blue-tinted skin reflecting the soft glow of the control panels. Her forearms worked in perfect harmony, pressing buttons and adjusting settings as the ship continued its journey. "Captain," a voice called out from the communication station. It was Vex, the ship's communication officer. His thin, elongated fingers hovered over the controls as he turned his oval-shaped head toward her. "We have detected an unauthorized life form in Cargo Bay 7, Captain Viextala's golden eyes narrowed. This was unexpected and potentially dangerous. The Celestial Wanderer had departed from Starbase Alpha 3 cycles ago, and they were now deep in space, far from any rescue or support. "What kind of life form?" she asked, her voice calm despite her concern. Vex checked his readings again. "Unknown, Captain. But it's giving off high heat signatures and appears to be moving." The captain turned to her security chief. Krell, the bulky, reptilian officer, stood at attention, his scaled skin shifting from green to orange in response to the potential threat. "Krell, take a security team to investigate. Use caution. We don't know what we're dealing with." Krell nodded, his jaw muscles tightening. "Yes, Captain." He selected 2 officers from his security team and headed toward the cargo bay. The corridors of the Celestial Wanderer were wide and tall, designed to accommodate the various species that made up its crew. The lights dimmed slightly as the ship automatically conserved power during this quieter cycle. Krell and his team moved with practiced precision, their weapons ready but not raised. When they reached Cargo Bay 7, Krell signaled for his team to take positions on either side of the door. With a quick gesture, he activated the door sensor, and it slid open silently. The cargo bay was filled with supply containers, spare parts, and equipment necessary for their long journey. Everything seemed in order, except for a strange sound. Coming from behind a stack of food synthesizer components, Krell raised his scanner and detected a life form just beyond the containers. He signaled his team to spread out and approach from different angles. "Identify yourself," Krell called out, his translator converting his natural clicking language into the standard galactic tongue. The noise stopped. There was a moment of silence, followed by a yawn and the sound of something or someone standing up. "Hello?" a voice called back. "Sorry, I must have fallen asleep." A figure stepped out from behind the containers, and Krell's team immediately aimed their weapons. Standing before them was a creature they had only seen in data files and warnings, a human. The human male raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no weapons. "Whoa, easy there. I'm not looking for trouble." Krell kept his weapon steady. "Identify yourself and explain your presence on this vessel. My name is Jack Miller. I'm an engineer from Earth. I was doing some maintenance work in this bay before departure, and I guess I fell asleep behind these containers." The human rubbed the back of his neck. "How long have we been traveling?" Krell didn't lower his weapon. Humans were from Earth, classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. Their planet had crushing gravity, atmospheric toxins, and extreme temperature, variations that had forced its inhabitants to evolve with remarkable resilience and adaptability. These traits made humans both fascinating and frightening to most galactic species. 3 cycles, Krell replied. "You have been unauthorized on this vessel for 3 cycles. Jack's eyes widened. 3 cycles? That's almost a week in Earth time. Oh man, my supervisor is going to kill me." Krell tapped his communication device. "Captain, we have found the life form. It's a human male who claims to be an engineer. He says he accidentally remained on board after performing maintenance." There was a pause before the captain's voice came through. "Bring him to the bridge. Use restraints if necessary." "That won't be necessary," Jack said quickly. "I'll come peacefully. This is all just a big misunderstanding." Krell considered for a moment, then nodded. The human hadn't shown any signs of aggression, but Krell kept his team alert as they escorted Jack to the bridge. When they arrived, the entire bridge crew turned to stare at the human. Most had never seen one in person before. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Under their gaze, Captain Zixtala rose from her command chair, her forearms clasped behind her back as she studied the human. I am Captain Zixtala of the Celestial Wanderer. You are trespassing on my vessel? Jack nodded. Yes, ma'am. Captain, I apologize for that. Like I told your security chief, I was doing some maintenance work in Cargo Bay 7 before departure. I had been working double shifts for days, and I guess exhaustion caught up with me. I fell asleep behind some containers, and no one found me during the departure checks. First Officer Nixvala stepped forward. She was tall and slender, with pale green skin and large, dark eyes. Captain, we should place him in stasis until we can return him to the nearest human outpost. Having a Deathworlder aboard is a significant risk, Jack frowned. Deathworlder? That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? It is an accurate classification, Nixvala replied coolly. Earth's gravity is 1.5 times stronger than the galactic standard. Your atmosphere contains oxygen at levels toxic to most species. Your temperature variations would kill most sentient beings. These conditions have made your species unusually resilient and potentially dangerous. Captain Zixtala held up one of her hands to silence her first officer. What is your function as an engineer, Jack Miller? I specialize in propulsion systems, Jack replied. Primarily hybrid drives like the ones on this ship. I was part of the maintenance team at Starbase Alpha that helped prepare your vessel for this journey. The captain's golden eyes showed interest. And you are familiar with our propulsion systems? Yes, ma'am. I've worked on similar systems for about 8 years now. Captain Zixtala was silent for a moment, considering. Their journey would take 14 more cycles before reaching their destination. Having an additional engineer, especially one familiar with their propulsion systems, could be valuable. Our journey continues for some time before we can return you to human space, she finally said. I cannot spare the resources to place you in stasis for that duration. If you are willing to assist our engineering team during the journey, we will provide you with quarters and rations. First Officer Nixvala looked alarmed. Captain, I must protest. Your protest is noted, First Officer, Captain Zixtala interrupted. But my decision stands. Jack nodded, relief evident on his face. Thank you, Captain. I can definitely help out. And I promise I'm not as dangerous as your first officer seems to think. We shall see, Captain Zixtala replied. Chief Engineer. Zol Barracks will assess your skills and assign you appropriate duties. Krell will show you to available quarters and provide you with the necessary supplies. As Jack followed Krell off the bridge crew returned to their duties, though many still cast curious glances at the human. Captain Zixtala resumed her seat, wondering if she had made the right decision. Little did any of them know how valuable this accidental passenger would soon become. 3 days passed on the Celestial Wanderer as Jack Miller settled into a routine. Chief Engineer Zol Barracks had assigned him to basic maintenance tasks, clearly testing his abilities before trusting him with anything important. Jack didn't mind. He used the time to learn more about the ship and its systems. Zol Barracks was unlike any being Jack had ever seen. The chief engineer had 6 limbs that ended in tentacle-like appendages, each splitting into smaller, more precise tentacles for detailed work. His gray-purple skin seemed to shimmer under the engine room lights, and his large eyes could focus independently on different tasks. Your understanding of our propulsion systems is adequate, Zol Barracks told Jack as they worked on calibrating fuel injectors. The alien's voice came through the translator with a slight mechanical tone. Jack smiled. Thanks. That's high praise coming from you. It was not praise, Zol Barracks replied, though Jack noticed a slight color change in the engineer's skin that suggested amusement. Jack had just finished his shift and was heading to the mess hall when the ship lurched violently. He was thrown against the wall as the lights flickered. A moment later, alarms blared throughout the vessel, the ship shuddered again, and Jack felt the subtle change in vibration that told him they had dropped out of F-tail travel. That wasn't good. He turned and ran toward the engine room. When he arrived, chaos greeted him. Emergency lights flashed and the engineering crew moved rapidly between stations. Zol Barracks stood at the main console, all 6 of his limbs working frantically. What happened? Jack asked, approaching the chief engineer. Barracks didn't look up. The primary quantum flux regulator has failed, catastrophically. Jack knew this was serious. The quantum flux regulator was essential for maintaining the delicate balance in the antimatter containment system. Without it, the ship's power core would eventually destabilize. "How long do we have?" Jack asked. 7 hours before containment fails completely, Zolbarix replied. His skin now a pale gray color that Jack had never seen before. "But our life support will fail before that." The bridge doors slid open and Captain Zixtala entered with First Officer Nixvala close behind. "Report," the captain commanded. "Zol." Barricks's tentacles fluttered in what Jack now recognized as a sign of distress. "The containment field is destabilizing. Without the regulator, we'll lose antimatter containment. In approximately 7 hours. Can it be repaired?" Captain Zixtala asked. "No," Zolbarix replied. "The regulator has been completely destroyed. The internal matrix has melted. Do we have a spare?" Nixvala asked. "No, these components are supposed to last the lifetime of the ship. They're custom-built at the shipyards." Captain Zixtala's golden eyes reflected the emergency lights. "Options? None," Zolbarix replied grimly. "The nearest assistance is 26 light cycles away. Even if we could transmit a distress signal, no one would reach us in time." The engineering crew fell silent. Jack looked around at their defeated expressions. He had been studying the ship's systems during his shifts, and while he didn't fully understand the quantum technology, he thought he might be able to help. "I might be able to do something," Jack said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to him. First Officer Nixvala's expression was skeptical. "You?" she asked. "This technology is far beyond human understanding." Jack didn't take offense. "Maybe, but I think our immediate problem isn't the regulator itself. It's the life support system." "That's going to fail first, right?" Zolbarix nodded. "Yes, the power fluctuations are affecting all systems. Life support is already starting to degrade." "That I can definitely fix," Jack said confidently. "I've worked on similar systems before. If I can stabilize life support, that gives us more time to figure out the regulator problem." Captain Zixtala studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Proceed, Engineer Miller." Chief Zolbarix assigned someone to assist him. Zolbarix gestured to a junior engineer named Plex. "Help the human with whatever he needs." Jack and Plex headed to the life support control room. The ship's artificial gravity was already fluctuating, making it difficult to walk straight. Plex, with his forelegs, seemed to handle it better than Jack. The life support room was hot and filled with a thin haze. Warning lights flashed on nearly every panel. "The main oxygen recyclers are failing," Plex explained, his voice high with stress, "and the temperature regulators are overheating." Jack examined the systems quickly. The ship's life support was more advanced than anything he'd seen on human vessels, but the principles were similar. "The problem is the power supply," Jack said. "The fluctuations from the damaged regulator are causing surges. We need to bypass the main power coupling and create a buffer." Plex looked uncertain. "That would require accessing the maintenance tunnels. The oxygen levels are already dangerously low in there, and the radiation from the damaged regulator is leaking into that section." Jack nodded. "I can handle it. Humans are pretty good with low oxygen, and we can tolerate short radiation exposure better than most species." Plex's eyes widened. "You would risk that?" "Better than all of us dying when life support fails," Jack replied with a shrug. "I'll need some tools and maybe some insulated gloves if you have them." Plex gathered the necessary equipment while Jack studied the ship's schematics. The maintenance tunnels were narrow designed for the smallest crew members, not for a human. Jack's size. It would be tight, but he could make it work. Armed with tools and a basic breathing mask, Jack entered the maintenance tunnel. The space was cramped, forcing him to crawl on his hands and knees. The air was thin, making each breath a conscious effort. Sweat beaded on his forehead from both exertion and the rising temperature. "How are you doing?" Plex's voice came through the communication device. "Fine," Jack replied, though his lungs burned. "I'm almost at the main junction." When he reached the power coupling, Jack saw the problem immediately. The surge protectors had been completely fried, allowing power spikes to hit the life support systems directly. He would need to create a new circuit to regulate the power flow. Working quickly, despite the difficult conditions. Jack disassembled parts of the secondary systems to build what he needed. His hands moved with practiced skill, connecting wires and rerouting power conduits. "This isn't going to be pretty," he muttered to himself, "but it should hold." After an hour of intense work, Jack connected the final component of his makeshift power buffer. There was a brief spark, then the lights in the tunnel stabilized. "Plex, check the life support readings," Jack called through the comm. There was a moment of silence, then Plex's excited voice came through. "Oxygen levels are stabilizing. Temperature is returning to normal parameters." Jack allowed himself a smile of relief. He crawled back through the tunnel, emerging sweaty and grimy but successful. When he returned to the main engineering room, he found Captain Zextala waiting with Zolbarix. The chief engineer's skin had returned to its normal color. "Life support is stabilized," Jack reported. "It's not a permanent fix, but it should hold for now." "Well done," Captain Zextala said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "You have bought us valuable time." Zolbarix studied Jack with new interest. "How did you manage to create a buffer with our technology?" "Engineering principles are pretty universal," Jack explained. "Now, about that quantum flux regulator problem, ... The real challenge was just beginning." With life support stabilized, Jack returned his attention to the main problem, the destroyed quantum flux regulator. The engineering team gathered around the main display as Zolbarix explained the situation in more detail. The quantum flux regulator balances the energy flow between our antimatter reactor and the ship's systems, the chief engineer said, his tentacles moving in complex patterns as he brought up diagrams on the screen. "Without it, the containment field will eventually collapse." Jack studied the schematics carefully. The technology was advanced, but not completely beyond his understanding. "Can we build a replacement?" he asked. Zol. Barricks's skin changed to a deep purple color that Jack had learned indicated negative emotions. "Impossible. The internal matrix requires specialized materials and equipment that we don't have on board." "What about a temporary bypass?" Jack suggested. "Something to stabilize the containment field until we can reach a repair station?" The alien engineers exchanged glances. "Such a thing has never been attempted," one of them said. Jack wasn't deterred. "Let me take a closer look at the damaged regulator. Maybe there's something we can salvage." Captain Zextala, who had been listening quietly, nodded her approval. "Proceed, Engineer Miller, but exercise caution. The area is highly radioactive." Jack and Zolbarix made their way to the regulator chamber. The door had been sealed due to radiation leakage, and warning symbols flashed on the control panel. "The radiation levels are too high for direct exposure," Zolbarix warned. "We should use the maintenance drones." And Jack checked the readings on the panel. The radiation was intense, but not immediately lethal for a human. "How long would the drones take to remove the regulator?" "Approximately 3 hours," Zolbarix replied. Jack shook his head. "That's too long. We don't have that kind of time." He looked at the alien engineer. "I can go in." "Humans have better radiation tolerance than most species, at least for short exposures." Zolbarix's eyes widened. "That would be extremely dangerous, even for a human." "I know," Jack said, "but it's our best option right now." "I'll need a radiation suit if you have one that will fit me." The alien engineer reluctantly agreed, and soon Jack was dressed in a protective suit that was slightly too small for his human frame. It would provide some protection, but not complete shielding. "You have 20 minutes before you reach dangerous exposure levels," Zolbarix instructed. "After that, you must exit immediately, regardless of progress." Jack nodded, took a deep breath, and entered the chamber as Zolbarix sealed the door behind him. The regulator room was bathed in an eerie blue glow from the damaged equipment. Jack could feel the heat through his suit as he approached the destroyed regulator. It was larger than he had expected, about the size of a small refrigerator, with complex circuitry and crystalline components that were now partially melted. Jack worked quickly. disconnecting the regulator from its housing and examining the damage. As he suspected, the internal matrix was completely destroyed, but the outer components and some of the secondary systems were still intact. "I've got the regulator," Jack reported through his com. "It's in bad shape, but there are parts we might be able to use." With careful movements, Jack removed the regulator unit from its mounting and carried it to the chamber door. Zolbarix operated the airlock system to allow Jack to pass the device through without opening the main door. "That's enough exposure," Zolbarix said through the com. "You need to exit now." Jack knew the alien was right. He could already feel the effects of the radiation, a slight dizziness and nausea that would only get worse. He made his way back to the door and went through the decontamination process before rejoining the engineering team. Medical Officer Plex Vora was waiting with a scanner. The slender, blue-skinned alien passed the device over Jack's body, frowning. "At the readings, you have absorbed a significant amount of radiation," Plex Vora said. "You need treatment immediately." "Later," Jack insisted. "We need to figure out how to fix the regulator first." The medical officer looked to Captain Xtala, who had just entered the engineering bay. The captain studied Jack for a moment, then nodded. "A brief delay in treatment is acceptable if Engineer Miller feels capable of continuing." Jack turned his attention to the damaged regulator, which had been placed on a workbench. The engineering team gathered around as he began to disassemble it further. "The main problem isn't the regulator itself," Jack explained as he worked. "It's the containment field resonating at the wrong frequency. That's what caused the regulator to fail in the first place." Zolbarix moved closer, his tentacles twitching with interest. "What makes you say that?" Jack pointed to a particular component. "See these burn patterns? They're consistent with a feedback loop, not a simple overload. Something made the field unstable, and the regulator tried to compensate until it couldn't anymore." The alien engineers looked at each other in surprise. They hadn't considered this possibility. "If that's true," Zolbarix said slowly, "then replacing the regulator wouldn't solve the problem. The new one would eventually fail too." "Exactly," Jack said. "We need to fix the field first, then worry about the regulator." First Officer Nixvala, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. "How would you propose to stabilize a quantum containment field without a functional regulator?" "That's a technological paradox," Jack smiled. "Sometimes you have to think outside the box." "The field generators themselves are still working, right? They're just out of sync. If we can manually adjust them to the correct frequency, the field should stabilize enough for us to implement a temporary bypass for the regulator." "Captain," Xtala considered this, "such adjustments would require accessing the field generator chambers. Those areas are even more radioactive than the regulator room." "I know," Jack said, "but I can handle it." He looked at Zolbarix. "I'll need your guidance, though. I understand the principles, but, the exact frequencies and settings." "We need." Zolbarix's skin shifted to a lighter shade, indicating deep thought. "This approach is unorthodox, but theoretically sound." He turned to Captain Xtala. "I believe we should attempt Engineer Miller's plan." The captain nodded. "Very well. But first, Engineer Miller will receive medical treatment to mitigate his radiation exposure. We need him at full capacity for this task." Jack didn't argue. The nausea was getting worse, and he knew he needed to be in better shape for what came next. As Plex Vora led him to the medical bay, Jack's mind was already working on the next steps. The containment field had 4 generators, each needing precise calibration. It would be challenging, dangerous work, but he was confident it could be done. In the medical bay, Jack lay on a treatment bed as Plex Vora administered anti-radiation therapy. The medical officer worked efficiently, but couldn't hide his curiosity. "Most species would be severely ill after such exposure," Plex Vora commented, "yet you seem only mildly affected." Jack shrugged. "Earth has some naturally radioactive areas. Humans have developed some resistance over time. Not immunity, but better tolerance than most." As the treatment continued, Jack closed his eyes and thought about the task ahead. The next few hours would determine whether they all lived or died. The pressure was enormous, but strangely, Jack felt calm. This was what he was good at: solving problems, fixing things. Especially when the stakes were high, he would not let this crew down. After receiving treatment in the medical bay, Jack felt stronger. The anti-radiation therapy had worked quickly, though Plex Vora warned him that additional exposure would compound the damage to his body. Jack returned to the engineering bay where the crew had been busy. They had gathered all available data on the containment field generators and set up a communication system that would allow Zolbarix to guide Jack through the calibration process. "We have less than 4 hours before containment fails completely," Captain Ziextala informed them. "What is your plan, Engineer Miller?" Jack stood before the ship's command staff. His skin was reddened from radiation exposure, and dark circles had formed under his eyes. Despite his exhaustion, his mind was clear. "I need to manually realign the quantum field generators," Jack explained. "There are 4 of them surrounding the antimatter containment chamber. Each one needs to be adjusted to a specific frequency to stabilize the field." First Officer Nixvala crossed her arms. "And after that?" "Once the field is stable, we can use parts from the secondary communication array to build a resonance dampener," Jack continued. "That should prevent the field from going out of sync again. Then we can restart the regulator with a bypass circuit." The alien officers exchanged concerned glances. What Jack was proposing was highly unconventional and extremely dangerous. "The radiation in those chambers would kill you before you finish the first adjustment," Medical Officer Plex Vora objected. "Even with your human resilience," Jack nodded. "That's why I'll need to work fast. And I'll need a better radiation suit." He looked at Zolbarix. "Do you have anything designed for emergency containment work?" The chief engineer's skin rippled with concern. "We have one emergency containment suit, but it was designed for Caraxian physiology. It may not fit you properly." "I'll make it work," Jack said with determination. While the crew prepared the equipment Jack would need, Captain Ziextala pulled him aside for a private conversation. "You understand the risk you are taking," she said. "It wasn't a question." Jack nodded. "I do." "Why?" she asked, her golden eyes studying him intently. "You barely know this crew. This is not your ship. You have no obligation to risk your life for us." Jack thought for a moment. "Where I come from, if someone needs help and you can provide it, you do. It's that simple." He gave a small smile. "Besides, I'm kind of stuck here too. If the ship goes, I go with it." The captain seemed to accept this. "Your species is remarkable, Jack Miller. I begin to understand why humans have spread so quickly through the galaxy despite your late entry into space travel." Soon, Jack was ready. The emergency containment suit was too large in some places and too tight in others, but it would provide better protection than his previous gear. He carried a toolkit specially prepared by Zolbarix with the instruments he would need. "The calibration sequence is complex," Zolbarix told him, displaying the procedure on a portable screen. "I will guide you through each step. You must be precise." Jack studied the sequence carefully, memorizing as much as he could. "Got it, let's do this." The first field generator was located in a small chamber near the ship's core. As Jack entered, the radiation sensors on his suit immediately began to warn him of the danger. The air seemed to shimmer with energy, and he could feel a tingling sensation on his skin despite the suit's protection. "I'm at the first generator," Jack reported through his com. "Good," Zolbarix responded. "You will see a control panel on the right side. Open it and locate the frequency modulator." Jack found the panel and opened it, revealing a complex array of crystalline components and flowing energy pathways. "I see it," he confirmed. "Excellent. Now, you must adjust the primary resonance control exactly 3.7 units counterclockwise. Then lock it in place with the stabilizer rod." Jack's hands moved carefully, making the adjustment as instructed. The generator hummed and vibrated as he worked. When he locked the new setting in place, the energy flow visibly changed, becoming more stable. "First generator calibrated," Jack reported, moving to the second. Each generator was located in a different section of the ship's core, requiring Jack to move through highly radioactive areas between adjustments. By the time he reached the third generator, his movements had slowed, and sweat poured down his face inside the helmet. "Your vital signs are concerning," Plexvora's voice came through the com. "Your body temperature is elevated, and your heart rate is irregular." "I'm fine," Jack insisted, though he knew he wasn't. "Two down, two to go." The third generator proved more challenging. The radiation had damaged some of the controls, forcing Jack to improvise. Using tools from his kit, he bypassed the damaged sections and managed to make the necessary adjustments. "Third generator calibrated," he reported, his voice noticeably weaker. "One more." As Jack made his way to the final generator, he stumbled, catching himself against a wall. His vision was beginning to blur, and nausea rolled through his stomach. The radiation was taking its toll, even with the protective suit. "Jack, your radiation exposure has exceeded safe limits," Plexvora warned. "You must exit immediately." "Not yet," Jack replied, gritting his teeth. "Almost done." The final generator was the most critical. It controlled the master frequency that the others synchronized with. Jack's hands shook as he opened the control panel, but he forced himself to focus. "The final calibration is the most precise," Zolbarix instructed. "You must adjust it in increments of 0.1 units while monitoring the harmonic response." Jack worked methodically despite his deteriorating condition. Each tiny adjustment had to be perfect. As he made the final turn and locked it in place, the generator's tone changed, harmonizing with the others. "It's done," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All 4 generators are calibrated." Throughout the ship, the violent vibrations that had been plaguing them began to subside. The energy readings on the main engineering display shifted from red to yellow, indicating the containment field was stabilizing. "It's working!" Zolbarix exclaimed. "The field is stabilizing. Jack, you must return now." Jack tried to respond, but found he couldn't form the words. The room spun around him, and his legs gave way. He collapsed to the floor, the toolkit clattering beside him. Through his fading consciousness, Jack heard the alarmed voices of the crew over his comm. He wanted to tell them he was fine, that he just needed a minute to rest, but no words came out. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the steady blue glow of the properly calibrated field generator. The next thing Jack knew, he was lying on a bed in the medical bay. Plexvora stood over him, monitoring his vital signs. When the medical officer noticed Jack was awake, he called for the captain. "How long was I out?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse. 6 hours, Plexvora replied. "Your body needed time to recover from the radiation exposure." Captain Ziextala entered, followed by Zolbarix. Both looked tired but relieved. "The containment field is stable," the captain informed him. "Chief Engineer Zolbarix was able to implement your resonance dampener design and create a bypass for the regulator. The ship is operational again." Jack tried to sit up but found he was too weak. "So we're not going to explode?" "That's good news." Zolbarix's skin had turned a bright blue color that Jack hadn't seen before. "Your solution was unorthodox but effective. I have never seen anyone manually calibrate quantum field generators. It is considered theoretically impossible." Jack smiled weakly. "Sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer." Captain Ziextala stepped closer to the bed. "You saved this ship and everyone aboard, Jack Miller. We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." "Just doing my job," Jack replied, closing his eyes as exhaustion overtook him again. "Or what would have been my job if I hadn't fallen asleep in your cargo bay?" As Jack drifted back to sleep, he heard the captain say something to Zolbarix about remarkable human resilience. He would have agreed, but he was already dreaming of Earth and the stars beyond. Jack spent 3 days in the medical bay recovering from radiation exposure. Plexvora monitored him constantly, fascinated by how quickly his human body repaired itself. The medical officer took detailed notes and ran multiple scans, muttering about remarkable cellular regeneration and adaptive immune response. On the 4th day, Jack was finally allowed to leave the medical bay. He still felt weak, but his mind was clear, and he was eager to see how the ship was functioning with his Makeshift repairs, the corridors of the Celestial Wanderer seemed different now. Crew members who had previously avoided him now nodded respectfully as he passed. Some even stopped to thank him directly, their translators struggling to convey the depth of their gratitude. When Jack entered the engineering bay, he found Zolbarix and his team gathered around a holographic display of the ship's power systems. The chief engineer noticed Jack immediately and waved him over with multiple tentacles. "Engineer Miller," Zolbarix greeted him, his skin shifting to a warm orange hue. "It is good to see you on your feet again." "Thanks," Jack replied. "How's the ship doing?" Zolbarix gestured to the display. "See for yourself. Power flow is stable, containment field integrity is at 94%, and all major systems are functioning within acceptable parameters." Jack studied the readings with satisfaction. The bypass circuit and resonance dampener were working exactly as he had hoped. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would hold until they reached a proper repair facility. "The captain wishes to speak with you," Zolbarix added. "She is in the command center." Jack made his way to the bridge where Captain ZX was reviewing reports with First Officer Nix Vala. When Jack entered, the captain rose from her command chair. "Engineer Miller," she greeted him formally. "I am pleased to see your recovery is progressing well." "Thank you, Captain," Jack replied. "I hear the ship is running smoothly." "Indeed. YOUR unconventional solutions have proven remarkably effective." The captain gestured for Jack to follow her to a side chamber where they could speak privately. Once they were alone, Captain ZX's formal demeanor softened slightly. "What you did was beyond extraordinary, Jack Miller. According to our medical officer, you should not have survived the radiation exposure from even one generator chamber, yet you accessed all four." Jack shrugged. "Humans are pretty tough. We evolved on a planet that tries to kill us in 100 different ways every day. So I am beginning to understand," the captain said. "The Galactic Federation has classified Earth as a Class 12 Deathworld, but perhaps we have underestimated what that truly means." She activated a small display on the wall, showing their current position and trajectory. "We are now 8 days from Starbase Gamma, where proper repairs can be made. Once there, arrangements will be made to return you to human space." Jack nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Despite the danger and his near-death experience, he had enjoyed his time on the Celestial Wanderer. The alien technology was fascinating, and the challenges had pushed his abilities to their limits. "However," the captain continued, "I have been considering an alternative." She paused, studying Jack carefully. "I would like to offer you a permanent position aboard this vessel." Jack blinked in surprise. "Really?" "Yes, your knowledge of engineering principles, combined with your species' unique physical attributes, would be a valuable addition to this crew." She gestured to the ship around them. "As recent events have demonstrated, having someone with your perspective can be the difference between disaster and survival." Before Jack could respond, the door slid open and First Officer Nix Vala entered. Jack was surprised to see that her usual look of suspicion had been replaced by one of grudging respect. "I was initially opposed to this idea," Nix Vala admitted. "I believed having a Deathworlder aboard presented more risks than benefits. I was wrong." Jack smiled. "That means a lot, coming from you." The ship's communication system chimed, and Zolbarix's voice came through. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Central Command. They've reviewed our incident report and are requesting additional information about our emergency repairs." Captain ZX exchanged a glance with Nix Vala. "It seems your exploits have caught the attention of our superiors, Engineer Miller." The three of them returned to the bridge, where a holographic display showed a stern-looking alien with elaborate insignia on their uniform. Jack stood back, out of view of the transmission. As Captain ZX spoke with the official, the conversation was brief but intense. Jack couldn't understand all of it. The official used several terms his translator couldn't process, but he gathered that the captain's report had caused quite a stir at Central Command. When the transmission ended, Captain ZX turned to Jack with what he had learned to recognize as amusement in her golden eyes. Central Command is updating their classification on humans, she informed him. You are no longer being categorized solely as Deathworld survivors. Oh? Jack raised an eyebrow. What are we now? Essential engineering consultants, Nixvala replied, with a recommendation that all long-range vessels consider human crew. Members for emergency situations. Jack laughed, wincing slightly at the pain in his still-healing ribs from when he'd braced a collapsing support beam during his work on the generators. Wait until they meet Mary Lewis, my old boss back on Earth. She could rebuild this entire ship with duct tape and paper clips. The alien officers looked at each other in confusion, clearly not understanding the reference, but appreciating the sentiment nonetheless. Over the next few days, Jack spent most of his time in engineering, working with Zolbarix to document the repairs they had made and develop improvements. The chief engineer was eager to learn Jack's problem-solving approach, while Jack absorbed everything he could about the advanced alien technology. One evening, as Jack sat in the ship's observation deck watching the stars streak by, Captain ZX Tala joined him. Have you considered my offer? She asked, taking a seat beside him. Jack nodded. I have, and I'd like to accept, at least for a while. There's so much I can learn here, and maybe some things I can teach too. The captain seemed pleased. Excellent. I will make the arrangements when we reach Starbase Gamma. She paused, looking out at the stars. Your presence has changed this crew, Jack Miller. We have always prided ourselves on our advanced technology and sophisticated knowledge. Yet when disaster struck, it was human ingenuity and resilience that saved us. Sometimes the old ways are still useful, Jack replied. Humans had to solve problems with limited resources for thousands of years before we developed advanced technology. That kind of thinking doesn't just disappear overnight. As they sat in companionable silence, Jack thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought him here. A simple maintenance job, an accidental nap, and now he was part of an alien crew traveling between stars. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes. When the celestial wanderer finally docked at Starbase Gamma, Jack stood on the bridge with the rest of the command crew. Through the viewscreen, he could see other ships of various designs and multiple alien species moving about the massive space station. Welcome to your new life, Engineer Miller, Captain ZX Tala said. Jack smiled. Earth would always be home. But for now, his place was here, among the stars, with a crew that had gone from seeing him as a dangerous Deathworlder to a valued teammate. He couldn't wait to see what challenges awaited them next. The aliens had gained more than just repaired systems. They had gained a new perspective on what it meant to evolve on a world that constantly tried to kill you, and the remarkable adaptability such an environment produced. And Jack had gained a new appreciation for his own species' unique place in the galaxy. After all, sometimes being from a death world had its advantages.